Danny Marsh pushed his cleaning cart down the long hallway of the Galactic Integration Academy. The wheels squeaked against the polished floor, a sound he had grown used to over the past 3 years. The academy was quiet now. All the students had gone back to their rooms for the night. Only the soft hum of the station's air systems kept Danny company. The Galactic Integration Academy sat on a space station called Meridian 7. It floated in neutral space, far from any single government's control. Here, children from over 40 different alien species came to learn together. They were the sons and daughters of diplomats, merchants, and powerful leaders from across the galaxy. The idea was simple. If children from different worlds learned together, maybe their parents would stop fighting so much. Danny thought it was a nice idea. He also thought it mostly did not work. The kids still formed groups based on their species. They still looked down on each other. They still fought in the hallways when the teachers were not watching. But Danny kept these thoughts to himself. He was just the janitor. Nobody asked for his opinions on galactic politics. He was 52 years old with gray hair that had once been brown and hands that had grown rough from decades of honest work. Back on Earth, he had been a factory worker, then a maintenance man, then a husband and father. His wife Helen had passed away 8 years ago. His 3 children had grown up and scattered across the human colonies, busy with their own lives. Danny did not blame them. That was how life worked. Children grew up and moved on. When the job posting for a janitor position on Meridian 7 appeared, Danny had applied without much hope. To his surprise, they hired him. Humans were still relatively new to the galactic community, and most aliens found them curious. Having a human janitor was something of a novelty for the academy. Danny did not mind being a novelty. The pay was good, the work was steady, and he got to see things most humans would never see. Strange alien children with too many eyes or not enough limbs, teachers who floated instead of walked, food in the cafeteria that glowed or moved or sang when you tried to eat it. It was a strange life, but it was his life. Danny had made peace with that. Tonight, he was cleaning the East Wing. This part of the station was older and less popular. The heating system had been broken for months, and the administration kept promising to fix it but never did. Most students avoided this area. The classrooms here were used for storage, and the auxiliary cafeteria had been closed for regular meals. Danny liked the East Wing. It was quiet. He could work at his own pace without students running past him or teachers giving him disapproving looks for being in the way. He was wiping down a window when he heard it, a small sound like someone shifting in a chair. Danny paused and listened. There it was again. It came from the auxiliary cafeteria just around the corner. Probably just a maintenance bot, Danny thought, but something made him want to check anyway. He pushed his cart around the corner and stopped at the cafeteria entrance. The room was dark except for the dim emergency lights that ran along the ceiling. Tables and chairs sat empty in neat rows, but in the far corner, barely visible in the shadows, someone was sitting. Danny squinted. It was a child. A small figure hunched over one of the tables, wrapped in a cloak that looked too thin for the cold air. Danny hesitated. He knew he should probably report this to security. Students were not supposed to be out of their dormitories at this hour, but something about the way the child sat there, so still and so alone, made Danny's chest tight. He walked into the cafeteria, his footsteps echoing in the empty space. The child looked up as he approached. It was a boy. At least Danny thought it was a boy. The child had skin that was a pale blue-gray color, smooth and almost translucent in the dim light. His eyes were completely black, like 2 pools of ink set into his thin face. He had no hair that Danny could see, just smooth skin that extended over his scalp. His ears were slightly pointed, and his fingers, Danny noticed, were longer and thinner than a human child's would be. The boy watched Danny approach without moving. There was no fear in those black eyes, just a quiet watchfulness, like an animal that had learned to be still when predators were near. Danny stopped a few feet away from the table. Up close, he could see that the boy's cloak was worn and patched in several places. The boy himself was thin, too thin. His cheekbones stood out sharply, and his wrists, poking out from the cloak's sleeves, were like sticks. Danny had seen that kind of thin before. He had seen it in old photographs from Earth's history. He had seen it in the faces of refugees from colony wars. It was the thin that came from not eating enough for a long time. "Hey there," Danny said, keeping his voice gentle. "Cafeteria's closed, son. You should probably head back to your dormitory." The boy did not move. "I am waiting," he said. His voice was soft and careful, like he was choosing each word with great precision. His English was good, but there was an accent Danny could not place. "For the next meal cycle." Danny checked his watch. The next meal cycle was not for another 6 hours. He looked at the boy again, at those sharp cheekbones and stick-thin wrists. "You eat today?" Danny asked. The boy hesitated. It was just a small pause, barely noticeable, but Danny caught it. "I had morning allocation." Morning allocation. That meant the boy had eaten once today, probably something small, probably many hours ago. It was now nearly midnight. Danny thought about what he should do. The proper thing would be to escort the boy back to his dormitory and report the situation to someone in charge. Let the administrators handle it. That was not his job. His job was to clean floors and empty trash cans and stay out of the way. But Danny also thought about his own children when they were young. He thought about how his daughter Lucy used to sneak down to the kitchen at night when she could not sleep, and how he would always pretend not to notice when she took cookies from the jar. He thought about his son, who had gone through a growth spurt at 12 and seemed to be hungry every single hour of every single day. Children needed to eat. That was a simple truth that crossed all species, all planets, all cultures. "Hold on," Danny said. He walked back to his cleaning cart and pulled out his lunch bag. Maria, the head cook in the main cafeteria, always packed him extra food. She was a large woman from a colony called New Seville, and she had very strong opinions about how much humans needed to eat. Every day, she loaded Danny's lunch bag with enough food for 2 people, sometimes 3. Danny had tried to tell her it was too much. Maria had ignored him completely. She said he was too skinny and that she would not have it on her conscience if he fainted from hunger while mopping a floor. Danny had given up arguing with her months ago. Now he was grateful for her stubbornness. He brought the lunch bag over to the boy and set it on the table. Inside was half a turkey sandwich, an apple, a container of vegetable soup that was still warm in its insulated container, and a small bag of cookies. "Here," Danny said, "can you eat human food? I know some species can't." The boy stared at the food. Then he looked up at Danny. Those black eyes were impossible to read, but Danny thought he saw something flicker in them. Surprise, maybe, or confusion. "I can," the boy said slowly. "My species can consume most organic matter that humans eat, but this is your food." "I had a big breakfast," Danny lied. "Go on, take it." The boy continued to stare at him. Why? It was such a simple question, but the way the boy asked it made Danny's heart hurt. The boy was not asking why Danny was giving him food. He was asking why anyone would give him anything at all. Like the very concept of kindness was foreign to him. "Because you're hungry," Danny said. "And I've got extra. It's not complicated, son." The boy looked at the food again. Then slowly, carefully, like he expected it to be taken away at any moment, he reached out and picked up the sandwich. He took a small bite and chewed slowly. Then another bite. Then another. Danny pretended to be busy checking something on his cleaning cart while the boy ate. He did not want to make the child feel watched or uncomfortable. But from the corner of his eye, he could see the boy working through the food with a quiet desperation that broke Danny's heart. When the container was empty and the apple was gone, and even the cookie crumbs had been carefully gathered and eaten, the boy looked up at Danny. "Thank you," he said. "You did not have to do this." "No, I didn't," Danny agreed. But that's kind of the point, isn't it? Doing something because you want to, not because you have to. The boy tilted his head, studying Danny with those unreadable black eyes. "You are strange," he said. "Humans are strange." Danny laughed. It was a warm, genuine sound that echoed in the empty cafeteria. "Been told that before. What's your name, son?" The boy said, "I am called." "Nice to meet you. I'm Danny, Danny Marsh." He picked up his now empty lunch bag and tucked it back into his cart. "Listen, I'm here every night around this time, cleaning the East Wing. If you're ever hungry again, you come find me. Maria always packs me way too much food. You'd be doing me a favor, really. Otherwise, it just goes to waste." Stared at him for a long moment. "You would do this again?" "Every night if you need it." "Why?" There was that question again. Danny thought about how to answer it. He thought about all the complicated things he could say about human nature and compassion and the importance of taking care of each other. But was just a kid. He did not need a philosophy lecture. He needed something simple and true. "Because where I come from," Danny said, "we don't let kids go hungry. Doesn't matter where they're from or what they look like. A hungry kid is a hungry kid, and hungry kids should be fed." Was quiet for a long time. Then he nodded once, a small movement that Danny almost missed. "I will come tomorrow," said, "if you are certain." "I'm certain. Now get back to your dormitory before someone catches you out here and we both get in trouble." Stood up. He was even smaller than Danny had realized, barely reaching Danny's chest. The cloak wrapped around him like he was trying to disappear inside it. "Good night," Danny Marsh said. "Good night." The boy walked out of the cafeteria without looking back. His footsteps made no sound on the floor, like he had learned to move without being noticed. Danny watched him go, then turned back to his cleaning cart. He had work to do, but for the first time in a long while, he found himself looking forward to tomorrow. The next evening, Danny arrived at the auxiliary cafeteria to find already waiting. The boy sat in the same corner, in the same position, like he had not moved since the night before. But his black eyes tracked Danny as soon as he entered the room, and Danny thought he saw something that might have been hope in them. "Evening," Danny said, pulling his lunch bag from the cart. "Hope you like chicken. Maria went a little overboard today." He set the food out on the table. Tonight there was a chicken sandwich, a container of rice and beans, a small salad, 2 bread rolls, and a slice of chocolate cake. Maria had apparently decided that Danny needed to gain weight. Looked at the spread of food with wide eyes. "This is all for me." "Well, I'm going to have some of the cake," Danny said, sitting down across from the boy. "But yeah, the rest is yours, dig in." Did not need to be told twice. He ate with the same careful, deliberate pace as the night before, but Danny could tell he was hungrier than he wanted to show. The boy cleared through the sandwich and rice and beans in minutes, then slowed down to savor the bread rolls. Danny cut the cake in half and pushed one piece toward. "So," he said, taking a bite of his own piece, "how long have you been at the academy?" Paused his eating. 2 years. "That's a long time. You like it here?" The boy was quiet for a moment. "It is acceptable." Danny snorted. "That's a diplomatic answer, let me guess. The other kids don't treat you too well." Silence was answer enough. Danny nodded slowly. He had seen how the academy worked. The children formed groups based on their species, their family's wealth, their home world's political power. Anyone who did not fit neatly into those categories was left out in the cold, sometimes literally, as presence in this freezing cafeteria proved. "You got any friends here?" Danny asked. "No." "Family, parents who visit?" "No." His voice was flat. "I am a ward of the academy. My tuition is paid by a benefactor. I do not have family here." Danny processed this information. A ward of the academy. That meant was essentially an orphan, or at least alone in the universe. Someone was paying for him to be here, but that someone never visited, never checked in, never showed any personal interest in the boy. "That's rough," Danny said, "being alone like that." Shrugged, it was a small, resigned movement. "I am accustomed to it." No child should be accustomed to being alone, Danny thought, but he did not say it out loud. Instead, he finished his cake and started asking about his classes. What subjects did he study? What were his teachers like? Did he have a favorite? At first, answered in short sentences. Yes, no, acceptable, adequate. But as Danny kept asking questions, kept showing genuine interest, the boy began to open up. He talked about his mathematics class, which he found too easy. He talked about his history teacher, a four-armed creature from a planet Danny had never heard of, who told interesting stories about ancient wars. He talked about the library, which was his favorite place on the station, because it was quiet and nobody bothered him there. Danny listened. He asked follow-up questions. He laughed when made an observation that was unintentionally funny. He nodded seriously when talked about something that mattered to him. By the time the food was gone, nearly an hour had passed. Looked surprised when he realized how long they had been talking. "I should go," he said, standing up. "I have classes tomorrow." "Sure thing," Danny said. "Same time tomorrow." Hesitated. "You truly wish to continue this?" "I truly do. See you tomorrow." The boy nodded and left, moving silently through the dark corridors. Danny gathered up the empty containers and put them back in his lunch bag. Then he sat there for a moment, thinking. There was something about that bothered him. Not the boy himself, who seemed like a decent kid despite his circumstances, but something about his situation did not add up. A benefactor who paid his tuition but never visited. Other students who avoided him. A boy who was surprised by basic kindness like he had never experienced it before. Danny shook his head. It was not his place to dig into a student's background. He was just a janitor. His job was to clean floors and take out trash and stay out of the way. But he could also feed a hungry kid. That much, at least, was within his power. The days turned into a week, and the week turned into two. Every evening, Danny came to the auxiliary cafeteria with food from Maria, and every evening was waiting for him. They ate together and talked, sometimes about small things like the weather on various planets or the strange habits of different alien species, sometimes about bigger things like what wanted to do when he grew up or why Danny had left Earth. Danny learned more about during those conversations. He learned that the boy was incredibly intelligent, far beyond his apparent age. He learned that had read every book in the Academy's library, some of them multiple times. He learned that spoke 7 languages fluently and was teaching himself 3 more. He also learned that was lonely. The boy never said it directly, but it was obvious in the way he talked, the way he listened, the way he seemed to treasure every moment of their conversations. Danny was probably the first person in years who had shown any genuine kindness. That thought made Danny both glad and sad at the same time. "Tell me about Earth," said one evening, as he worked through a container of spaghetti and meatballs. Maria had discovered that loved human pasta, and she had started packing extra every day. "What do you want to know?" Danny asked. "Everything. What does it look like? What do the people do? Why did you leave?" Danny leaned back in his chair and thought about home. He thought about the small town in Ohio where he had grown up. He thought about the factory where he had worked for 20 years. He thought about Helen, beautiful Helen with her red hair and her laugh that sounded like bells. He thought about his children, who had been small once and were now grown adults with lives of their own. "Earth is a lot of things," he said slowly. "It's big cities with buildings so tall they touch the clouds. It's small towns where everybody knows your name. It's oceans that go on forever and mountains that scrape the sky. It's messy and complicated and beautiful and broken, all at the same time." "That sounds contradictory," observed. "It is. Humans are contradictory. We're capable of amazing kindness and terrible cruelty, sometimes in the same breath. We build things up and tear them down. We fight wars over stupid things and then come together to help strangers when disaster strikes. We don't make a lot of sense, even to ourselves. Process this. Your people sound chaotic. Danny laughed. We are, but you know what? That chaos is also what makes us adaptable. We don't have one way of doing things. We've got 1,000 ways and we're always coming up with more. When something doesn't work, we try something else. We fail a lot, but we keep going. And that is a strength. I think so. Some of the older species in the galaxy, they've been doing things the same way for thousands of years. That makes them stable, but it also makes them rigid. Humans have only been in space for a couple centuries, and we're already everywhere. Because we're not afraid to try new things, even if we mess up along the way. Was quiet for a moment, considering this. My people are very old, he said finally. We have traditions that go back 10,000 years. Change is not something we value. Danny perked up. This was the first time had mentioned anything about his own species. Your people, what are they called? Hesitated. For a moment Danny thought he would not answer. Then the boy said quietly, I am. Danny felt a chill run down his spine. He knew that name. Everyone knew that name. The Empire was one of the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. They controlled over 1,000 star systems. Their military was legendary. Their emperor's word was absolute law across a quarter of known space. They were also known for other things. For conquering planets that resisted their rule. For crushing rebellions with brutal efficiency. For viewing other species as inferior, useful only as servants or subjects. Danny looked at with new eyes. The boy did not look like a conqueror. He looked like a scared, lonely child who had never known kindness until a human janitor shared his lunch. I see, Danny said carefully. Is that why the other students avoid you? Partly, admitted. They have many enemies. Children from worlds we have conquered do not wish to be near me, and children from worlds that fear us also keep their distance. They think that speaking to me might draw unwanted attention. That's not fair, you're just a kid. You didn't conquer anybody. Fairness is not a concept the galaxy values highly. Danny could not argue with that. He had seen enough of galactic politics to know that fairness was a luxury, not a right. The strong did what they wanted, and the weak suffered what they must. It was an ugly truth, but it was true nonetheless. So why are you here? Danny asked. At a school on a neutral station instead of at home with your people. Was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. My father sent me away. Your father? He is an important man, a very important man. He believed that I would benefit from exposure to other species, other ways of thinking. He said it would make me stronger. His voice turned bitter. But I think the truth is that he simply wanted me out of the way. Danny's heart ached for the boy. To be sent away by your own father. To be abandoned on a space station among strangers who feared and hated you. To be alone in the universe, with no one to care whether you lived or died. I'm sorry, Danny said. That's a hard thing. It is what it is, shrugged, but Danny could see the pain behind his casual gesture. I have learned to manage. Managing isn't the same as living. Looked at him sharply. What do you mean? I mean that just surviving, just getting through each day, that's not enough. You deserve more than that. Everyone does. You deserve to have people who care about you. You deserve to be happy. Happiness is not something to pursue. Then maybe they are missing out. Stared at Danny for a long moment. Then, for the first time since Danny had met him, the boy smiled. It was a small smile, barely more than a twitch of his lips, but it was real, and it transformed his face from something closed and guarded into something almost beautiful. You really are strange, Danny Marsh said, but I think I like it. Danny grinned. Glad to hear it. Now finish your spaghetti. Mario will be offended if you don't clean your plate. On the 14th day of their routine, Danny arrived at the auxiliary cafeteria with his usual bag of food. But this time, the cafeteria was empty, was not in his usual corner. He was not anywhere in the room. Danny waited for an hour, but the boy did not appear. He told himself not to worry, was probably just busy with schoolwork, or maybe he was sick, or maybe something had come up in his dormitory. There were plenty of reasonable explanations. But Danny could not shake the feeling that something was wrong. He finished his rounds that night in a distracted haze. He mopped floors and wiped windows and emptied trash cans, but his mind was elsewhere. He kept thinking about those black eyes that had finally started to show something other than emptiness, about that small smile that had meant so much. Sleep did not come easily that night. Danny lay in his small bed in his small quarters and stared at the ceiling, trying not to imagine all the things that could have happened to a lonely alien boy on a space station full of people who feared him. The next morning, everything changed. Danny was awakened by an alarm, not the normal morning alarm that signaled the start of a new day. This was the emergency alarm, the one that meant something serious was happening. He had heard it only twice before in his 3 years on the station. Both times had been drills. This did not sound like a drill. He pulled on his clothes and ran out into the corridor. Other residents were doing the same, stumbling out of their quarters with confused and frightened expressions. Nobody seemed to know what was happening. Danny followed the crowd toward the main observation deck. As he got closer, he could hear voices shouting, people crying, the general chaos of panic spreading through a population. When he reached the observation deck, he stopped cold. Through the massive windows that looked out into space, Danny could see a ship, but calling it a ship felt inadequate. It was more like a floating city, a massive structure of black metal and purple light that dwarfed the station like an elephant dwarfs an ant. Its hull was covered in angular patterns and symbols that pulsed with energy. Weapons arrays jutted from its surface like the spines of some enormous beast. And it was not alone. Behind the massive ship, barely visible against the darkness of space, were more shapes. Dozens of them, hundreds, an entire fleet hanging in the void like a swarm of predators waiting to strike. "What is that?" someone beside Danny whispered. Danny knew. He had seen pictures in news reports, in history documents, in the fearful stories that humans told each other about the threats lurking in the galaxy. He said, "That's the Imperial fleet." The word spread through the crowd like wildfire. The conquerors, the destroyers, the empire that had crushed 100 worlds beneath its heel. Why were they here? What did they want? Was this an invasion? The station speakers crackled to life. A voice spoke, deep and resonant, using English that was heavily accented but perfectly clear. "Citizens of Meridian 7, we come not to make war. We come seeking one who resides within your walls. Cooperate with us and you have nothing to fear. Resist, and the consequences will be severe." The crowd erupted into frightened murmurs. Danny barely heard them. His mind was racing, putting pieces together. A boy sent to this station by his important father. A boy who had disappeared last night without explanation. The "we're here for." But why? What could a lonely child possibly have done to warrant the attention of an entire Imperial fleet? Danny did not know, but he intended to find out. He pushed through the crowd and started making his way toward the East Wing. Around him, the station was descending into chaos. Security personnel ran through the corridors, trying to maintain order. Diplomats screamed into communication devices, demanding explanations. Teachers herded students toward safe zones, their faces pale with fear. Danny ignored all of it. He moved with the confidence of a man who had walked these halls for 3 years, who knew every shortcut and back passage. Within minutes, he reached the auxiliary cafeteria. And there finally was. The boy sat in his usual corner, but he was not alone. 2 soldiers flanked him, their bodies encased in armor that seemed to absorb the light. They were huge, easily 7 feet tall, with the same blue-gray skin as but darker, harder. Their eyes glowed a faint purple as they watched Danny approach. Danny hesitated for a moment. These soldiers could probably kill him with one hand. They could probably kill everyone on this station without breaking a sweat, but was there, and Danny had made a promise to himself to look after the boy. He walked forward. "Danny," said. His voice was calm, but Danny could see the tension in his thin shoulders. "You should not be here." "Neither should you, by the look of it." Danny stopped a few feet away from the table, keeping his eyes on and trying to ignore the massive soldiers on either side. "What's going on, son? Why is there a fleet of warships outside?" Opened his mouth to answer, but before he could speak, the cafeteria doors slid open again. A figure entered that made Danny's blood run cold. The newcomer that much was obvious. He had the same blue-gray skin, the same angular features, the same aura of cold power. But where was small and thin, this was tall and broad. Where's eyes were black and unreadable, this one's eyes were deep purple, glowing with an inner light that spoke of immense power barely contained. He wore no armor, just simple robes of black and silver. But he did not need armor. His presence filled the room like a physical force, pressing down on everyone and everything. The air itself seemed to grow heavier when he entered. Behind him came more soldiers, advisors, attendants. They spread out through the cafeteria, taking positions along the walls, their eyes scanning for any threat. Within moments, the small room was filled with members of an alien court. Danny had never felt so out of place in his life. The tall walked toward, his steps measured and deliberate. The soldiers beside bowed their heads as he approached. Himself stood up, his face a mask of careful neutrality. "My son," the tall said. His voice was deep and resonant, the kind of voice that expected obedience and always received it. "I have searched for you." Son, Danny's mind reeled. His father was not just an important man. His father was the emperor of the absolute ruler of over 1,000 star systems, one of the most powerful beings in the entire galaxy. And Danny had been sharing his lunch with the prince. "Father," said. His voice was steady, but Danny could hear the strain beneath it. "I did not expect you to come personally. You fled the imperial palace. You hid yourself among lesser species. You refused to answer our communications for 2 years. The Emperor's purple eyes burned with something that might have been anger or might have been hurt. Did you truly believe I would not come for you?" "I believed you would send someone," said quietly. "I did not think you would come yourself. You have an empire to rule. And an heir to retrieve." The Emperor's gaze swept over the cafeteria, taking in the dingy walls, the broken heating vents, the general atmosphere of neglect. "This is where you have been hiding, this forgotten corner of a neutral station among humans and their ilk." "This is where I have been learning," said. There was a new note in his voice, something stronger, more defiant. "Learning things I could never have learned in the palace." "And what, pray tell, have you learned?" Looked at Danny. It was just a brief glance, but the Emperor caught it. Those purple eyes turned toward Danny, and suddenly Danny felt like an insect beneath a magnifying glass. "You," the Emperor said. The human stepped forward. Danny's legs wanted to lock up. Every instinct he had screamed at him to run, to hide, to get as far away from this terrifying creature as possible. But he had been a father. He had been a husband. He had lived through hard times and come out the other side. He knew that sometimes you had to stand your ground, even when you were afraid. He stepped forward. "Your name," the Emperor demanded. "Danny Marsh, I'm the janitor." A ripple of something went through the assembled. Amusement, maybe, or disbelief. The Emperor himself showed no reaction. "The janitor," he repeated. "My intelligence reports say that you have been meeting with my son every night for 2 weeks, that you have been feeding him, speaking with him, treating him with kindness." That's right. Why? It was the same question it asked that first night. Danny gave the same answer. Because he was hungry, and because he was alone. Nobody should be hungry and alone, not even an emperor's son. The emperor stared at Danny for a long moment. Danny held his gaze, though it cost him everything he had. Those purple eyes seemed to look right through him, seeing every secret, every fear, every weakness. You did not know who he was, the emperor said. It was not a question. No, he was just a kid who needed help. And when you discovered his identity, it didn't change anything. A hungry kid is a hungry kid, no matter who his father is. The emperor turned back to, "This is what you wanted me to see, this human." Not just him, said, what he represents. Father, for 2 years I have lived among species you have taught me to despise. I have seen them at their worst and at their best. I have seen cruelty and cowardice, yes, but I have also seen kindness, compassion, generosity, things that they have forgotten, things that we dismiss as weakness. Because they are weakness. Are they? His voice rose, gaining strength. Danny Marsh is a janitor. He has no power, no wealth, no status. By standards, he is nothing. And yet he did something that no one on this station, no one in our entire empire thought to do. He fed a hungry child. He talked to a lonely boy. He showed kindness without expecting anything in return. The emperor's expression did not change, but Danny thought he saw something flicker in those purple eyes. And you believe this makes humans special. I believe it makes them different. Different in ways that we could learn from if we chose to. Stepped forward and Danny saw something remarkable. The boy was not afraid of his father. He was challenging him. You sent me here to learn, father. You said exposure to other species would make me stronger. Well, I have learned. I have learned that strength is not just about power and conquest. True strength is being able to show kindness when it costs you nothing. True strength is caring about others, even when you do not have to. Pretty words, the emperor said, but words do not hold empires together. No, but they might make empires worth holding together. Silence fell over the cafeteria. Danny barely dared to breathe. The soldiers and advisors stood frozen, watching the confrontation between father and son with expressions that ranged from shock to fear to something that might have been hope. The emperor looked at for a long time, then he looked at Danny. Human, he said, my son has developed unusual ideas during his time away from home, ideas that conflict with 10,000 years of tradition, ideas that could shake the foundations of our empire. Danny swallowed hard. Is that so? It is, and apparently you are responsible. The emperor paused. I should have you executed for corrupting the heir to the throne. Danny's blood went cold. Beside him stiffened. Father began, but the emperor raised a hand, cutting him off. I should have you executed, the emperor repeated, but I will not. Danny let out a breath he did not know he had been holding. Do you know why? The emperor asked. I really don't. Because my son is right. There is something different about humans, something that we have lost or perhaps never had. I have watched your species since you first ventured into space. You are young and foolish and often self-destructive, but you are also kind, in ways that make no logical sense. You help strangers for no reason. You sacrifice yourselves for people you have never met. You care about the weak and the vulnerable, even when it brings you no benefit. The emperor turned to look out the window at the stars beyond. His massive fleet hung in the darkness, a testament to of power and conquest. When I was young, he said quietly, I asked my father why we conquered other worlds. He told me it was because we could, because power was its own justification, because the strong ruled and the weak served, and that was simply the way of the universe. He turned back to face Danny and, I have repeated those words to myself for 500 years. I have built my empire on them. And yet now, standing in this forgotten cafeteria, watching a human janitor and my runaway son, I find myself wondering if my father was wrong. Stepped forward. He was wrong, father. Power without purpose is meaningless. Conquest without compassion is hollow. We have ruled 1,000 worlds for 10,000 years, and what do we have to show for it? Fear, resentment, a legacy of blood and ashes. That legacy is what keeps us safe. Is it, or is it what keeps us isolated? We have no allies, father, only subjects and enemies. When trouble comes, and it always does, we face it alone, because we have never given anyone a reason to stand beside us. The emperor was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was different, softer, more uncertain. What would you have me do, my son? Abandon everything our people have built? No, transform it. Start small. Show kindness where we have shown cruelty. Offer friendship where we have offered only dominion. It will take time, it will be difficult, but it is possible, gestured toward Danny. He showed me that, one sandwich at a time. The emperor looked at Danny again. This time there was something new in his gaze, not just the cold assessment of a ruler evaluating a subject, something warmer, something almost like respect. Danny Marsh, the emperor said, you have done something remarkable. You have given my son hope. You have given him a vision of what the could become instead of what we have always been. Danny shrugged awkwardly. I just shared my lunch. Nothing remarkable about that. That is where you are wrong, human. In a galaxy full of selfishness and cruelty, simple kindness is the most remarkable thing of all. The emperor reached into his robes and pulled out a small object. It was a medallion made of some dark metal that seemed to absorb light. Strange symbols were etched into its surface. Take this. Danny accepted the medallion carefully. It was surprisingly heavy in his hand. That is my personal seal, the emperor explained. Anyone who bears it is under my protection. If you ever need anything, anything at all, show this to any ship or outpost. They will move heaven and stars to help you. I don't need a reward, Danny said. I told you I just fed a hungry kid. And I told you that is precisely why you deserve one. The emperor almost smiled. You have much to learn about the Danny Marsh. We do not forget our debts, and I am now in your debt more than you know. Danny looked at the medallion, then back at the emperor. Can I ask you something? You may. What happens now, I mean? Are you going to take him back home? The emperor considered the question. He looked at his son, at the thin boy in the worn cloak who had somehow survived 2 years alone in a hostile universe, who had somehow found something worth believing in. My son has grown, the emperor said slowly. He is not the child I sent away 2 years ago. He has ideas now, convictions, a vision for the future. He paused. Perhaps it is time I started listening to him. His black eyes widened. Father, you want to change the empire. Very well, come home and change it, but not as a child hiding in corners, as my heir, as the prince you were born to be. The emperor placed a hand on his shoulder. Show me this kindness you have learned. Show our people. Convince them that there is another way. If you can do that, perhaps they can become something more than we have been. Looked at his father for a long moment. Then he looked at Danny. Will you be all right? Asked. Without me here to eat all your food. Danny laughed. It was a warm, real sound that echoed through the cafeteria, breaking the tension that had hung in the air. I'll manage. Maria will just have to find someone else to overfeed. Smiled, that small, rare smile that Danny had worked so hard to earn. Thank you, Danny Marsh, for everything. You're welcome. Now go change the galaxy. Make it a little bit kinder. Nodded once. Then he turned and walked toward his father. The emperor put an arm around his son's shoulders, a gesture that seemed awkward, like he was not used to physical affection. Together, they walked toward the cafeteria doors. At the threshold, the emperor paused and looked back. Danny Marsh, he said, if you ever grow tired of cleaning floors, there is a place for you in my court. A teacher of human customs, perhaps, or an advisor on relations. They could use someone like you. I appreciate the offer, Danny said, but I think I'll stick to mopping for now. It's honest work." The emperor inclined his head. "As you wish, but the offer remains open for the rest of your life." Then he was gone, sweeping out of the cafeteria with his son and his soldiers and his entire court. The doors slid shut behind them, and Danny was alone again in the quiet, empty room. He stood there for a long time, holding the emperor's medallion in his hand, thinking about everything that had happened. A boy, a sandwich, and a conversation. That was all it had taken to change the course of an empire, to give hope to a prince and pause to an emperor, to prove that kindness was not weakness but strength. Eventually, Danny put the medallion in his pocket and walked back to his cleaning cart. He had floors to mop and windows to clean. The station would need to be put back in order after all the chaos. But as he worked, Danny smiled. He thought about heading home to a palace full of tradition and ceremony, carrying with him the lessons he had learned in a broken-down cafeteria. He thought about the emperor, so powerful and so lost, reaching out for something he did not fully understand. He thought about humanity, young and messy and contradictory, stumbling through the galaxy and leaving kindness in their wake. Maybe that was what humans were meant to bring to the stars. Not technology or military might or political cunning, just kindness. The simple, stubborn insistence that people should take care of each other, no matter what. Danny finished his rounds as the station's alarms quieted and the fleet into the darkness of space. By morning, everything would be back to normal. The students would return to their classes. The teachers would resume their lessons. The diplomats would continue their negotiations. And Danny would continue pushing his cleaning cart down the long hallways of the Galactic Integration Academy, ready to share his lunch with the next hungry kid who needed it. Because that was what humans did. That was who they were. 3 years later, Danny retired from the academy. He moved to a quiet colony world called New Eden, where the gravity was gentle and the sunsets painted the sky in shades of orange and gold. He bought a small house with a garden, where he grew tomatoes just like Helen used to. He kept in touch with through occasional messages. The young prince had returned to thee and begun his work. It was slow going, admitted. Changing 10,000 years of tradition was not easy. There were opponents, skeptics, those who saw kindness as a betrayal of everything the stood for. But there were also victories. New schools that taught cooperation alongside conquest, treaties with species that had warred against for centuries, small kindnesses spreading through the empire like seeds carried on the wind. "We are planting a garden," wrote in one message. "It will take generations to bloom, but it will bloom, Danny, because you showed me it was possible." Danny read the message on his porch, watching the sunset turn the sky to fire. He thought about all the small moments that had led to this. A hungry boy in an empty cafeteria, a sandwich shared without expectation of reward, a conversation between two lonely people who had found each other in the vastness of space. Such small things, such ordinary things, and yet they had changed the course of history. One evening, as Danny sat on his porch enjoying the cool breeze, a ship descended from the sky. It was small and elegant, bearing the purple insignia of the royal house. Danny watched it land in the field beyond his garden, feeling no surprise. He had been expecting this somehow. Emerged from the ship. He was taller now, broader in the shoulders, his bearing that of a prince who had grown into his role. But when he saw Danny sitting on the porch, he smiled. That same small, rare smile that Danny remembered. "You look well," said, walking up the path to the house. "Getting by," Danny replied. "You?" "Changing the galaxy, one sandwich at a time." Danny laughed and gestured to the empty chair beside him. "Sit down, I've got soup." Sat, they watched the sunset together, two friends from opposite ends of the universe, sharing a meal as they had so many times before. "My father asks about you," said after a while. "Every time we speak, he wants to know how the human janitor is doing." "Tell him I'm doing fine. Tell him the tomatoes are coming in nicely this year." "I will, he will be pleased." Paused. "He has changed, slowly but truly. He speaks of kindness now without contempt. He asks advisors about the welfare of common citizens. He even smiled once in public. It caused quite a scandal." Danny chuckled. "Sounds like progress." "It is, all because of you. All because of a sandwich. All because of a human who believed that kindness mattered." Turned to look at Danny, his black eyes serious. "You saved my life, Danny Marsh. Not just from hunger, from despair. From becoming something cold and cruel like I was taught to be. You showed me another way." Danny was quiet for a moment. Then he reached over and patted his shoulder, a simple gesture of affection that crossed all the distances between their worlds. "You saved yourself, son. I just gave you something to eat while you figured things out." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the last light fade from the sky. Stars began to appear, thousands of them, millions, each one a sun with worlds of its own. Out there somewhere the Empire was slowly transforming. Kindness was spreading, one small act at a time, changing hearts and minds across 1,000 star systems. And it had all started here, with a janitor, a prince, and a sandwich. Some things, Danny thought, transcended species and empires and the vast distances between stars. Kindness was one of them, the simple act of caring for another being, expecting nothing in return. That was something no power in the galaxy could conquer. It was humanity's greatest gift to the universe. And Danny Marsh, janitor, father, friend, had been the one to share it. The end.